Hey, what's up, Isaac?
Not much, dude. Well, I guess I already asked you. Um, Look, I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. I don't have an issue with you, but the way you talk about me, it sounds like you really have an issue with me. So why don't we just hash it out, whatever it is?
I mean, I don't think there's anything to hash out. I don't have an issue with you. I just think the server sometimes feels like a little bit of a feeding ground for your ego. But I mean, I don't hate you or anything. It just feels a little weird sometimes.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not. Like, what does that mean exactly?
I don't fucking remember. I'd have to go back to all of our weird prior talks. There's a lot of weird shit. I just get the impressions. And listen, sometimes people say to me, I get the impression sometimes that a lot of this is a real big ego trip for you. Heard that a lot. I get that impression a lot, and I don't know. It just it feels a little weird. And then sometimes the server feels like it's full of like cultish like sycophants that are just looking to fucking dunk on any random meat eater that wanders in it. All just kind of leaves a salty taste in my mouth, I guess.
Yeah, the word's actually sycophant. I don't know if that's my ego making me correct you. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, like everyone has an ego. Like I like, doing well in a debate. It's fun, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so what? The problem is you think that I'm an egomaniac and my server is the feeding ground for my, you know, crazy ego. Basically, that's like.
Not necessarily. Those are it's a little bit. Yeah. Let's go with that one. These are just like personal feelings I have, though. It's not like a condemnation of the validity of your philosophical arguments, or a condemnation of you as like a human being as a horrible person. It just feels a little ego trippy sometimes to me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take it as a criticism of my arguments. Although, if you have any, I'm happy to hear those. But with respect to how you see me, like, I mean, I don't know how much of it is really founded and how much isn't. Like, everyone has an ego. I like winning a debate. The people in my server are people who I like. I mean, we let people in here who don't agree with me, but at the same time, it's like, of course they're going to like me in my server. I don't know if that's like kind of more true here than in your server. Like, I mean, you
Yeah, but you
already
don't think
knew
it's
I
kind of
was
weird
going to.
sometimes, like calling into shows to like ambush people with like your level 14 vegan name the trait like dialogue arguments? Like, you don't think sometimes it comes off as like a little self-serving? Like,
I don't actually think that I'm. Well, look, when you say ambush, it makes it sound like I can tell how you're thinking about it. You're thinking about it, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're like, here's this guy who basically is like trained to be like a UFC fighter at like, debating people, and he's just going in to prey on white belts just because it feels good to wreck someone who doesn't know how to defend himself. Like, is that
basically.
honestly all I can say is that that's not what I feel motivates me. I like winning a debate, but like if you watch me, like I don't know how many of my conversations you've watched. And the thing is, I'm kind of like, before even saying any of this, I understand that changing your perception of me is not something that I can likely do by just telling you things about myself. It's kind of one of those things where you have to see how someone operates. And I think one of the main things, which like we can talk about this, was I was certainly I was being an asshole to you about the threshold deontology thing. I was lording that over your head, and just like I was being a dick. I was fully being mean about that. So I think that's shaped a lot of this too. Now, okay, but so what was I going to say about calling in? So, look, I don't think people are ever perfect at accounting for what motivates them. I'm sure you probably know this shit. There's like, they have like studies where they, the researchers know what is causing the subject to do a given thing. So they know what's causing their action. The subject doesn't. They put them through some procedure and then ask the subject to give an account of why they did what they did, and the subject creates some rationalization that just has like nothing to do with the fact or the thing that the researchers know actually prompted their action. So like that's just one way to describe it, but or one example of it, I guess. But I think that people are generally bad at accounting for why they do what they do. But if you ask me to like try to account for like what's going through my head when I call in, I like to draw attention to what I'm doing on YouTube. That's one thing. I know if I call and talk to someone who's got a platform that people will see that. So there's that. There's like its content. I like having the conversations. If it turns into a heated debate, I like debating. Like, I enjoy it. I enjoy going in with something that I think is like a solid, stable position and seeing if someone can defend it. And I'm kind of going on for a bit here, so I'll just say this other thing. I think that if you actually watch my debates, now there might be some examples that aren't like this, where I come in like really hot, but what I would do if I was in my best state, and what I think you can find a lot of examples of me doing, and what I think I did in that Sam Cedar video, even that you're criticizing, right? I just come in and I say what I want to say honestly, and I'm friendly, and I only start like, firing back with philosophy, like to the extent that I need to respond to what they're saying. And I don't try to talk over their head with words they don't know. And I try to make sure they understand. So I'm not
You don't
saying
think that calling into a show that's like a random ass like radio talk show where people talk about politics, and the first thing you say is like, oh, well, I guess I am who I am. That would be a tautology. You don't think that sounds a little bit self-serving?
I don't know how it's self-serving. Like, do you mean like pretentious maybe?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, because I don't know how it's self-serving. I don't know what that does to serve me.
Well, it kind of like serves to bolster your ego.
Oh.
It's self-serving. You come on and you immediately open with the philosophy terms.
I don't know. I think it might be on some level that I'm thinking like I don't even know if I'm really doing this. I'm just trying to like give you like something. Like I don't really think I say it to fucking stroke my ego. I mean, I don't even fucking know. Like, I don't know why I say what I say. Like, I can understand if you think that's pretentious or something. Like, I guess maybe it is. I just think it's kind of funny. Like, I don't know. That's just me being me.
Okay. I mean, that's not really a defense of anything, right? Or like a refutation of anything I've said, right? Like if somebody were to like say the N-word at black people like 50 times, and I was like, don't you think this is a little racist? And I'm like, well, I don't know, man. That's just me being me.
Well, you said self-serving, and then I said I don't really see how it serves me. But then I offered you the word pretentious, right? And I guess pretentious, like you could probably say it is pretentious, right? Because it's like, oh, I say something that's complicated and that people wouldn't understand, and
sure, I guess like here, like the difference would be like, let's say that I wanted to persuade some rando fucking radio host who I know doesn't know dick all about philosophy or anything related to ethics about like something related to veganism, right? On a lefty show, I might call in and I'd be like, hey, have you guys ever talked about animal rights here? I think it's really interesting that animal agriculture contributes to a lot of pollution on the planet. Maybe you guys should think about whether or not it's good or bad, to be engaging in those practices. That can like spur a conversation that can kind of get people on that track. Even if you don't go like immediately for the vegan kill shot, you've got like, hey, maybe you could reduce or curb your consumption of animal products that are contributing to bad things. Maybe you bring up, hey, they're kind of unhealthy for you, rather than starting off with the most aggressive dumpster topic. Can you name to me the one trait that if humans had it and animals didn't would make humans worthy, endowed of moral protection? That like instead of going for like the immediate like kill shot dumpster argument, like you're trying to shit on somebody like a random person that wandered into the Discord, like seems like there's like friendlier, easier ways to engage people in that conversation that are just like normies in public.
Man, it's like it's so weird because the way you talk about me, it's like you just think that I'm coming from a place that, like, I mean, I just don't know how to say it. It's just not where I'm coming from. So I guess there's one or two things that occurred to me when you said that. So one is like, I like to talk about what I know, and I think about the subject in this kind of like simple, like straightforward way. And that's just what I like to talk about. I mean, maybe I'm just fucking autistic. I don't know. And what was the other one that it's like going for the kill shot? Like, I don't think it's like, again, it's like you're talking about me like I'm sitting there like waiting to prey on people or something with like philosophy. It's like I'm just going in and talking about what I think makes sense. I'm trying to talk at an understandable level, and that's where I want to start. But if you want to make the point that if my goal was just to persuade the person I'm talking to, there's probably more effective ways to do that. That probably is true. I mean, that almost certainly is true, right? Like, I'm not the nicest person. I'm mean to people a lot of time. If I wanted to persuade people, I probably would, be nicer too. There's probably a few things I do. So I don't think you should look at what I do from the angle of like, as if I'm trying to, persuade always the person I'm talking to or persuade the most people. Like, I'm kind of just like saying what I actually think is true. And if I'm talking about something that's not the most like expedient way to convince someone or whatever. It's like, it's just because that's what I actually want to talk about. So I don't know. Did I not address something you said?
Well, I guess like, so what is the point of calling in? What was your ultimate goal? I'm curious.
Well, I don't think people are good at accounting for exactly what their goals are. I don't know exactly what my goals are. I like
Wait, so
talking to
do you just like
people. I like doing.
aimlessly wander the earth with no direction, with no like end purpose in mind? You have no goal when you call. So you're just like, I'm gonna call into Sam Cedar today because why the fuck not? You clearly have some goal because you brought up veganism. So at least your goal is to talk about veganism. You must have some purpose in mind for a conversation like that.
Well, I mean, when you go to like you have literally no goal, it's like that's not quite what I'm saying. But I don't have like,
I'm just
I
restating
don't
what you
have
said, but
some.
yeah.
Well, no, you said no goal. I think I don't think I said I have no goal. I think I said that we're bad at accounting for what their goals are, and I'm not sure if I have a clear goal.
That
I
you're
might
We're
have.
kind of equivocating, but like bad
Well, no
bad at
goal of not
accounting.
having a clear goal. One can be like it's kind of you're not quite aware of everything that motivates you, and I am aware of some of the things that motivate me, but that's different than saying I don't have a goal, right? Like there's got to be
We're
things that
This is a pretty hardcore equivocation. Like
I
when
don't
I
think
ask
it
like,
is.
yeah, so like when I ask like, well, what's your goal in doing this? And you're like, well, psychologists do a lot of research, and it's actually quite hard to account for the goals of any individual. Well, okay, that's not really an answer. Like
No, no,
even
no,
though
no.
it might be
Wait.
hard for
You're
you,
not. One
what?
second. You're not being fair right there. I'm not saying like what I'm going to go on to do is like try to explain the kind of things that motivate me as best I can. I'm just saying that before I start. Right? I'm just saying that to like keep in mind. Like I don't know if I'm giving a perfect account of what motivates me. Like
Okay,
that's
I
why I
don't
say
need
it.
you to tell me that you're not giving me a perfect account of what is like the ultimate motivator of you in like your entire life. But I think that like if you purposefully call in to a radio show, I think you have a decent idea of at least what you feel like is the reason why you're calling in. That should be something you know. Like it's a very
Yeah.
purposeful
Well.
action. You like were obviously looking forward to the conversation. You were on hold for a while. Like you have some purpose in mind. I'm just curious what that purpose was.
Well. I mean, I don't always know exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. But if I had to try to give like some idea, it's like, I want to talk about veganism. I want to, make videos for people to see. I want to see how, different public figures respond to the arguments. I want to test out my arguments, things like that. Right. I don't know which is the main motivation. I'm sure I'm not naming all of them, but it's like things roughly like that.
So you don't have any, and maybe you don't. I don't know. So you don't when you approach like public figures, you don't have any goal in mind for like this is what I'd like to get out of this conversation, or this is my purpose for having this talk. I would like to
There,
establish this point. You don't think about any of that at all. It's just you pick up the
well,
phone and
no,
you.
I'm aware of outcomes that I like, but I'm not necessarily driving at like a particular one. So, like one outcome that I really would like is if they ended up agreeing, right? That's great. Another is if they're a bullshitter, that I do a good job of exposing the bullshit. So those are both good outcomes, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So
But I
I mean,
mostly
we
just
can.
like talking. I think that one of the biggest ones is just I want to like speak to people who I'm aware of who are like, you know, out there making content who are known. Like it's kind of interesting to talk to them about the issue and see how they react to it. So there's a few things.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess it's a lot different than what I'm used to hearing, but sure.
Well, yeah, because I think that most people try to rationalize why they're doing what they're doing and give a clear answer. But the reason that I keep making this kind of hedge, right, which you seem to like the way you talk about it makes it seem like you think I'm trying to be Weasley. But the reason I say that is because, like, I just find all the time when I say what my goal is, I just find myself doing the same action, but it's like it's a counter example to like me doing that action to achieve that goal. And I just start thinking like, I'm not always that fucking good at knowing what my goals are. So for me, I'm satisfied with like, a rough idea. Like I don't even need that a lot of the time. But yeah, it's like if you want a rough idea, I want to talk about veganism. I want to talk to people who have platforms who I've known and watched, and I'm curious how they'd react. If it turns into an argument, I'd like to win the argument and show how bad their arguments are. If they're just receptive, I just like to provide them with the information and persuade one more person. So it's things like that.
Wait, who's tighty?
Oh, I thought that was your mic, which really weirded
No.
me out. Who is
Okay.
it? We can
Jesus
just mute them.
Christ.
Who's in the fucking wind tunnel?
Wait, so do you have a purpose in
I
mind for this conversation, or did you just like, oh, I just
Yes.
want to
Oh
talk?
no. This one I have a purpose in mind. My
Sure.
purpose right here is well, let me think of how to say it. It's that I would like
You feel like I
okay,
have
if I'm really
mischaracterized you. You want me to have a better impression of you because you feel like the impression I have right now doesn't accurately resemble what you consider to be reality, right? That I have a bad impression of you that's not resembling of what.
yeah, and there's a bit more because there's people who I wouldn't care about that with, but there's like kind of two factors with you. So one is that I actually respect you, right? Like I like what you do on the internet. I think you're, like I'm not gonna fucking suck your dick here, but like I think you're good at what you do, and you're a smart guy, and I respect you. So that's one, right? Someone who I respect. I'd rather not have weird shit with them. And then the other is that you have a platform, and I don't really want stuff that I don't think is fair being said about me on there. So I'd rather at least try to hash it out if it's possible.
Okay.
But yeah, the motivation here is just to try to correct whatever weird perceptions you have of me as best as I can.
All right. Well, I'll try to watch more of your content and adjust my priors, my Bayesian analysis of you. I will adjust it as I go along. I'll gather more information and I'll develop a better opinion of you, Isaac. Okay.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And there was one or two other things. I might just think for a minute here. You can talk to the others.
Hey, what's up, others?
Hello.
Wait, is there a guy named Crystal Geyser? Is he in here right now?
He's shaking in his fucking boots, dude.
I'm here.
Uh-oh. There he
Wait,
is.
did Isaac
Oh,
you
yeah.
really not have a response to Vosh saying that all consumption under capitalism is just blanket unethical and there's no way to counter that?
No, I made a video about his argument. I formalized it and got him to sign off on the formalization, and then created a syllogism that refutes the first premise, where he's actually like committed to all the premises in virtue of things that he said.
Okay.
So it's like the opposite of that. It's like I went to lengths to refute it. I think the reason people think that, though, is the first time I talked to him, again, it was kind of one of these like, oh, like I guess I'll go try to talk to Vosh, right? And I went on his stream, and he bit the bullet right away on if there was a Holocaust of the LGBT community. Like, I mean, don't even ask me how he got to that reductio, but if there's a Holocaust of the LGBT community, he would just say that it's completely fine to support that financially. So he bit the bullet right away, but then he tried to justify biting the bullet by saying like all consumption is basically the same. He's trying to run that kind of argument. So I was just kind of looking for what is the argument for that, trying to kind of get some premises on the table, a conclusion, and then I sort of trust that once it's set up and it's formalized and stuff, I'll be able to see what part of it weirds me out. And we got partway into that process and stopped. So I think it's because I didn't actually provide a refutation of it there that people might have that impression.
Huh. Okay. All
yeah.
right. Yeah, hit me up real quick. I gotta leave pretty soon. What's up?
Yeah. So with respect to like our actual ideas, because like I think like the character stuff is pretty straightforward. Like you have a bad impression of me, but I think that to sum it up, like I think done my best here to explain where I'm coming from. You may or may not agree. I don't know, and I just hope that you will kind of keep your eyes open. You don't have to literally go watch my content, but just
Sure.
just
I'll temper my opinion of you. Sure thing.
Yeah, update your Bayesian, whatever you're saying. Okay, so that's the character stuff, and then it's just the actual logic stuff. And if there's further things you think I'm doing, you can just raise them to me, and I'll try to address them. And if I do think I'm doing them, maybe I'll stop them. So then the other is just the actual like our positions. Like, are there actually some like any propositions that like we have different attitudes about that are important that you're aware of?
I'm not sure because I'm not 100% sure what your positions are on everything, so it's hard for me to say.
Okay. Well, I guess just the two that we've have had sort of like battles on before are veganism and normative ethics, right? So
Okay.
what I think about your position on veganism, right? Like I think I don't believe you're a psychopath. So I think like I have a hard time thinking that it's honest. I mean, I'm sure that upsets you, but like I can't help that that's how I seem to perceive it, right? That's just the belief that I seem to have. I can't control what beliefs I have, right? So well, maybe to some extent, but not always. So that's my honest view on that. But I understand your position is consistent, right? What is the trait you name? It's just species. You just say it's fine to kill anything that's not human, or
Oh no, I mean I think that's one argument you could give is you could protect the likeness of humans or whatever. I don't know. I think it's all bullshit. For me, I don't believe in like concepts of like goodness or badness or whatever. I just look at like yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we agree to an extent about that. Like, you're not a moral realist, right? But presumably, like when you say X is good or X is bad, what you're saying is that X aligns with your preferences. Something
Kind
roughly
of,
like
yeah.
that.
I like X, I don't like X. A form of non-cognitivism, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it turns into I like X, that's a proposition, so that wouldn't be non-cognitive. But if it was like X yay, X boo, then okay. But like the point is, like, regardless of what exact form of anti-realism you're using, like you have basically moral statements, you think those cash out in terms of like we have some kind of subjective affinity towards something, like whether we want to say it's an intentional state, whether we want to say it's a hypothetical norm, it's like a goal desire pair, whether we want to say like whatever the exact fucking meta-ethic details are there, it's something along the lines of like you're just expressing an affinity for like a particular state of affairs. Like if murder is bad, I'm just saying like, you know, I have some kind of preference for the state of affairs where people aren't being murdered. Like we're roughly on the same page about that.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So with name the trait, now I don't want to, I actually, it's funny. I don't even care about like, we don't have to have a whole debate about this, but just if we want to sort out where our difference is. So when obviously human Holocaust, you say that's wrong. Animal Holocaust, you don't say that's wrong. And then what is your answer if I say what's true of the animal Holocaust that if true of the human Holocaust would cause it to be in line with your preferences?
I can infinitely holocaust animals and there's no foreseeable harm that will ever come to me by infinitely holocausting animals.
Okay. And so if it was the case that you could infinitely Holocaust humans with no foreseeable harm, you would like accept that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So yeah, in my point of view, like like that is the extent of the disagreement, right? Like that's a value I don't hold. And if I were debating you, like, you know, I would just start just drawing situations with that or whatever and just trying to persuade people like, look, that's crazy. You don't agree with that. Do you really think this is okay? That kind of thing. So, but if you want my honest take, like based on what I've seen of you, it's very hard for me to believe you believe that. It's pointless for us to sit here trying to argue it because, like you've said many times, if you were lying, it's like, unless I'm going to like cross-examine you for fucking hours and maybe somehow get it out of you, it's like we're not going to find out that you're lying. But, you know, and I don't always think people lie for like horrible reasons also. Sometimes it can just be that you like, you know, I don't fucking know, but I don't even say that with like a whole ton of judgment. I just don't believe you. So
okay.
I don't know.
The reason there's two problems here. One, the reason why it's unfathomable to think that my position could be true is because the idea that we can infinitely holocaust some group of humans and it never negatively impact us requires us to change the world in a pretty significant way. It would require us to be able to enslave some massive group of people that would never have the opportunity to rise up, that would never have other people that would advocate for them and cause problems related to that slavery. And then we would have to ignore the fact that slavery is like a drag in an economic and a cultural sense in every size, shape, and form. We would have to radically reshape the world in order to reach a point to where infinitely holocausting or enslaving humans would be something that would be like preferential to me. So that's like the first big problem. It's kind of like when Vegan Gains presented to me the idea that if there was some group of humans that I could kill that would never be empathetic or respect other human life or would always kill other humans, would I do it? It's like, well, yeah, I guess I would. But like these types of humans, I don't believe exist. Everybody has some baseline capacity for empathy and won't just be instantly murdering every single person they see. If they did, then sure, I would kill that group of humans. But I don't think that there are any real group of humans like that. So that's the first problem. The second problem is it's possible to conceive of a world in which I would be vegan if, like, say, for instance, every other person was like a vegan. If I was on a planet where 98% of people were vegan, I might be vegan because eating an animal there might get me literally fucking killed, right? So if you're militant enough or if you have enough people, you know, supporting some particular ideology that would cause like a great harm to you if you were to go counteract it to it, then yeah, I probably would be a vegan in that world and I would support the idea in that world. Sure.
Okay. So It seemed like only, so I guess those are both points that you're delivering to try to make it more believable to me that you actually think this. And like, I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, but I just think we both hate this part of the discussion. Like, you don't give a fuck about proving you're not lying. I don't really give a fuck about finding out if you're lying. I just care about what the position says and how people will react to it, basically. But I'll say one more thing about that. You can say one more and then let's be done with it. I just have a hard time believing that even if we have some world where it doesn't affect you, like we create a little fucking, like, remember the universe box and it's just like a Rick and Morty little fucking world in there. I just still don't believe you. I don't think that you'd be fine with people just being fucking murdered and killed. But you know, that's all I really have to say about that. You want the last word on that?
Sure. I don't care if you want the last word. I mean, like, I would argue that we already live in that world to some extent, and most of us are already okay with it. Earlier, you appealed to psychological data that showed that people were really bad at figuring out their motivations for doing something. I mean, I could appeal to the idea that people are very good with diffusing responsibility to others and standing by and not feeling like they are 100% responsible for some given event. I consume products that I know are made in cultures where the people are treated in really poor ways. I consume products where, you know, companies have pressured governments or whatever into doing practices that, you know, are probably pretty shitty towards their workers. And we all of us do this today, and we live with ourselves just fine. You know, like in whatever world you're hypothesizing, it's really ridiculous for arguing so much over hypothetical, but in some world where you're hypothesizing where slavery is morally acceptable, it's not like you would walk out on the street and some slave would be dying in your driveway every single morning. It's more likely that this would happen in some place where you'd never see it, just like it does today with sweatshops in Vietnam or China. And it's likely that you would never have to directly confront it, you know, like we do with our foreign policy, where we drone strike the fuck out of people in Yemen and we don't really question it because we don't see it every day. So I mean, I think that my response is pretty believable if you understand the fact that we already consume some products that if we had to see it directly, we probably wouldn't feel as comfortable consuming. And I guess that would be my response to that.
Okay, so I could obviously say more, but I said I'd give you the last word. So I guess we'll leave it there.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's believable. You do think it's believable.
Okay.
That's where we're at.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, and just for the record, I could provide reasons as to why I think that further, but I don't.
Do one more. I have to leave soon, so give me one more.
Well,
you get the last word on it. Go ahead and hit us with.
What I most want to do actually is just I want to get one more topic, which I think this one will be quick because I think we already hashed this out in text at one point. So the other is just the normative ethics stuff, threshold deontology. Now, obviously, there's a whole thing about this. Just forget all of that. We both agree that the system is coherent, and we both agree that it's not real utilitarianism, right? Like, there's not a disagreement.
I don't want to talk about the other thing. I'm good. I'd rather talk about the vegan shit.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to stop, you can stop. But like, you don't think that the system like entails a contradiction or something, right?
Is this the the threshold deontology stuff?
Yes, and also you said one thing that was wrong on that stream. You said that Avi was informed of threshold, or we were informed of it by someone. Avi actually was digging through the literature and found it. Just little correction.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So, do you actually think the system is like contradictory, or just equivalent to some other system that already exists, or like are all those things just like?
Oh god, I'm not getting into big. My problem with the system is that the system takes the hardest parts of the system and then hand waves it. It doesn't really like address those parts. So, for instance, if we talk about threshold deontology, what we're saying is essentially some actions are probably right and probably wrong up to a given threshold where some ultimate amount of harm or whatever can be caused. But the real question is, well, how do you make that determination? Well, now we have to appeal to some other thing that's the hard question. Is like, at what point does something become more wrong, or at what point does something become like acceptable or whatever? That was the problem.
Yeah. So I actually think we can probably resolve this. So,
okay.
What you're saying. So first of all, you mentioned something about probability. The system has nothing to do with probability, but you described it properly, though. I just think that word just somehow got in.
Wait, what did I say? Wait, what did I say probability for?
You said that the system tells you what's probably wrong at any given point. If we assume the system's true, then everything is either right or wrong. It's not.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was appealing to the vagueness of the when do you determine what's right or wrong. But ideally in your system, in an ideal world, it absolutely tells you what's right or wrong. Of course, sure.
Now, what we want to clear up about this is, so first of all, you have this one confusion sometimes where or maybe it's wrong to call it a confusion. I'm trying to be friendly here, but like you say that there's this huge problem because utility and deontology they don't have like the same units.
Yeah, they're not commensurate. Yeah.
Right. Now, So I'm going to explain why that's wrong, but then explain, well, that's right, but why that's not a problem, and then explain why still I understand what you're saying about vagueness and why that's a legitimate critique. So the thing is, if you have two different units, you can just express them in terms of some mutual unit, right? So I can say, here we have, killing someone. Let's take that action, right? So that has a certain effect on utility, and it's also the action of killing someone. So the utility is straightforward. We can just say, here's a mutual unit. We'll just call it, the moral unit. And we can say that every, bit of utility, which obviously there's a problem with quantifying utility too. So I'm sure that that's not some huge problem for you though, because you're roughly a utilitarian. Whatever exactly we mean by utility, we can say, there's some kind of like roughly like 1-to-1 relationship between units of utility and units of moral value.
But this is the hard part that I would have to
right.
ask you.
I'm about to come to that. Right. Because,
well,
in fact, I'll come around to it right now because we don't disagree about that. Right. So there's a huge, okay, well, here, let me finish this. So obviously you understand that you can just put them both, say that we knew the answer to how we want to do it, how we want to set up the weighting, which is the thing that you're like tripped out by basically. And which I also would agree is a serious thing to work on. Regardless of how we do the weighting, the point is just that you could give units of utility some kind of weighting in terms of another unit, which we could call like just moral value units or whatever. And you could give actions that, are instances of like deontological laws, some kind of value in terms of those units. And then we'd have a mutual unit that can account for units of utility and units of, deontic wrong. So without the question about how we do the weighting, you understand that as a notion is coherent. There's no contradiction.
So then my question, I'm pretty sure we're rehashing all of our old argument. So you're saying that we have deontological obligations: don't lie, don't murder. But we also have utilitarian forms of measuring, like how bad is murder, how bad is lying. We measure these in utilitarian points, and then we measure them in deontological points. We're going to create a third system that's going to unify these two things to make these values commensurate to one another.
Sorry, right? 1 second. Not third system, just third unit.
Third unit, yeah, that's going to make these two values commensurate with one another, right?
Sure.
Isn't that just whatever you name that new thing? Isn't that just utilitarianism?
No, because those units also count deontic actions, right?
Yeah, but the deontic actions have now been consequentially weighed with the utilitarian ones. Like you've given them a consequence value.
No, because their deontic weighting can differ from their weighting in utility.
Like, give me an example of of some deontological obligation and how we would measure that against a utilitarian thing.
You could have, the action of like murdering someone, and you could give that some kind of negative value in terms of deontology. Yep. And then you could also look at how much utility is incurred by the murder.
Yeah.
So you could have a single action that has this steady deontic value, and it could have different utilitarian values based on how much damage is caused by it. And then its values in the mutual unit would, vary based on.
So you've taken that single action and you've assigned it like a value now that makes it measurable under utilitarian calculus. So I don't understand. I don't think we'll ever move past it. It seems utilitarian to me. We're just basically doing utilitarian math, except we're counting the act of murder itself as having some negative utility, which I think a lot of utilitarians would be okay doing. And then like, it just feels like all utilitarianism to me. Like basically, like a utilitarian might say, if I murder someone, how much negative utility will I incur by doing this murder? And then will the benefits of the murder, so let's say you gain access to their fortune, like what benefit will I gain by murdering them? Well, let's weigh the gains versus the loss, and that's it. Well, in your form, where you're also taking into account some obligation, you're just a utilitarian that gives the act of murder like a few more points of negative utility. Like it just all feels like utilitarianism to me.
So I think I see on some level what you're saying. So you want to say we're kind of like just converting the utility or the deontic actions into utility. So it's all like ultimately utilitarian.
Yeah,
so,
if the values are commensurate, then it can be measured, yeah.
So there's just like basically two things about that that I don't think I agree with. So here, let me just think through how best to say this. Give me a few seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so The first is that, in fact, maybe I can just describe it as kind of one problem. So by no standard conception of utility would the units we're talking about be utils. So they're not just concerned with like happiness and mental states, like hedonic utility, which is like that's the one big kind of branch of utilitarianism, and they're not just concerned with preference satisfaction, which is like the other branch. So if you want to say that it's like some new kind of utilitarianism that is like concerned with something other than than preference or hedonism, which is what utilitarianism is normally concerned with, it's just some new branch of utilitarianism that's concerned with something else, then like I don't even know if I'd oppose that kind of statement. I would just oppose that it's like it is anything like a standard like utilitarianism, because you can just find examples. You can find cases where any like standard conception of utilitarianism is going to say something has a value that's different than the value it would have on this system. So
yeah, of course. But that's like the problem I have is that like when we propose some new normative ethics system, like the excitement is that we've somehow made it easier to generate like moral or not moral statements, but to generate oughts or to generate like an analysis of how good or bad a particular action is. Like that's what it feels like when we got a new normative ethics system.
Not quite. You can keep going though.
Okay, that's what I would want. That's what I like from normative ethics.
Great.
I want a normative ethical system that gives me an easy way to generate rights or wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel like something is good or bad. Somebody asks me, what do you think about social health care? I run that through a real utilitarian thing. Okay, well, how do I feel about the idea, the concept of the government paying for something? I'm okay with that. And then what are the outcomes of a universal healthcare system, single payer, whatever? And then I can evaluate it. Boom. I like that. That's why I like normative ethics. It's very practical. It lets me analyze situations. When you give me like a new system, you're like, oh, well, this allows us to unite obligations or duties with also utils. Oh, cool. Well, how do you do that? We just have to convert the obligations into utils. Well, if I could do that, like, then holy shit, then I would already solve like all of ethics. Like if I could just convert like moral obligations into utils.
That's a tiny bit misleading, because when you say convert it into utils, the units we're talking about would not be utils by any standard conception. Like I understand what you're saying. Well, they're not units of hedonic pleasure or preference satisfaction.
Whatever you want to call them. If you have
but those are the standard conceptions, though, Destiny.
Sure, but if you have deontological obligations and then you have utils, if you find a way to express utils in another value that you can also express deontological obligations in those values, well, then you can convert it all back to utils as well, right? It's basic math.
Convert it back to utils. What does that mean?
Well, in order for you to calculate whether or not an action is good or bad, what you do is you add up the deontological calculation into unit Z, and then the util calculation into unit Z. And then if it exceeds some certain threshold, then you choose which moral system you use or whatever, right? But if you can add everything up into one value and then figure out if it's right or wrong, I mean, then you could convert all of that back to some utilitarian value or some deontological value as well.
That was the part I was asking about. I don't understand that part.
Okay, sure. So let's say that I have... Let's say that I have like one util and I've got like one deontal, or I've got one D and one U, okay?
Sure.
Well, let's say that I make a third value called P. Let's say that one U is equal to 5D. Oh, so if I add these all together, now I have 6P. Well, if one U is equal to 5D, that means that 5D, like if I could convert it from one to another. Does that make sense? Like,
I understand that you're saying that a certain amount of units of utility as classically conceived would correspond to a certain
amount of deontological
of units.
Yeah.
Right. So I understand there has to be a correspondence there. But when you say convert it back into utility, we're not so the thing that weirds me out about that is you're not actually saying like you're not. So I guess I need to actually kind of go through that to understand how to say this. So we take some deontic action that has like a weighting of 2. We take, and that, so let's say we have some deontic action with a weighting of 2 in. Yeah.
Like let's say that the act of bombing a hospital deontologically is like -5. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the act of actually killing someone is -1. So like if we bomb a hospital and we kill 5 people, Okay, with our new system, we found a way to make that like -10 because we have the bombing the hospital is worth -5, and then killing somebody is worth -1, and we killed 5 people. So we bomb a hospital, kill 5 people. In our new system, that's worth -10. Well, if I wanted to find out like how
Can
many
we not do 5 people? Can we do one person so that because that's just gonna make it get confusing? Can we just say it's
Okay.
one person and it's
one person
-6?
then, right? Sure. So now it's -6, right?
Mhm.
But we can also say that killing 5 people is roughly the same as bombing a hospital. Like, we can make that direct comparison. We have to. If we've made these values commensurate with one another, then the values must be comparable. So now it feels like we're just back in utilitarianism. So a utilitarian would say, okay, well, I'm going to assign bombing a hospital as -5 util, and then killing a person is -1 util, and now I'm in utilitarianism. You're kind of getting to like a form, in my opinion, of like rule utilitarianism, where you've made a rule where bombing a hospital is -5, but like you're more or less at a utilitarian point of view. And then you're just trying to weigh, is the benefit of bombing the hospital, which is now -6 in the new units, we could just call those utils. Now, does that overcome whatever goodness? I don't know what goodness you get from bombing a hospital. Maybe they're all meat eaters, but yeah, that would be like
okay. So yeah, I think that I don't know if I can articulate this properly. This might turn into I have to write it out, but
Sure.
I think that what I want to say is that the deontic action that gets converted into Z and then converted over to units of util, whatever weighting it has in util is not going to correspond to its actual weighting in terms of what util typically means, right? Like that action, say that it's murdering someone, and the deontic component of it ends up being worth like a certain amount of utils, right? It's not I'd have to draw that out actually. Because I think that the problem is going to be that we're saying that there's this deontic action that you can say like technically it is worth as much morally as this many utils, but you're not actually saying the action it corresponds to that amount of utils, because the action measured in terms of utility standardly might just like not.
But you have to make it correspond. That's the whole point. That's how your moral system works. Is
Okay,
it has
so
to correspond.
let's just do it with like the math and try to figure it out technically. So if let's say that we have killing someone painlessly. Okay, so let's say killing them is -1 and there's just no units of utility. Okay, now,
Okay.
pardon me. So
I don't know if you would assign a 0 to killing someone with no pain, but okay, go ahead.
Well, wait. If we say that it has no effect on hedonic pleasure, like hedonic states, and it has no effect on preferences, then it would have no utilitarian way. It would just have a neutral weighting. It's just not good or bad, right?
Gotcha.
So
okay.
we just say it's so. Yeah. So there you have this action of killing someone that's worth 1. Like, what do we want to call why don't we just call them what they're? So T is going to be the threshold deontology units, and we'll say D and U for deontology and utilitarianism. So this action has a T weighting of like -1, and then we want to convert that over into utility. So I guess then we say that this action is worth -1 utility. But what we're really saying there is just that in unit Z, it's equivalent to that much utility. We're not actually saying this action carries that much utility as standardly conceived, because the action carries no utility, right? So we can try to hash that out more, but I just think that what we're
If you say that the action carries absolutely no utility,
Mhm.
but then you create a third variable to compare it to utility, it seems to be a contradiction.
I don't think there's a contradiction there. We can try to work through it though and see if there is, and if there is, then I'll grant it to you. But I don't think there is one.
I mean, it would be like me trying to say like I think that like music is better than
but let's
art.
not do
like wait, I can't compare those two values. But if I made like some third variable to compare them, then
But can I request that we just stick to the math and just try to figure it out instead of going into analogies like right at this stage? Is that okay?
Well, the problem is that the math doesn't support you. The math supports me, so we need another. I'm trying to help you.
Wait a second. Let's go because that's what we're trying to establish.
Sure. So the math. So if you have if you've taken two variables and you found a third way to make them commensurate, to make them comparable, then every variable can be measured against every other variable. But you're trying to say that deontological obligations can't do that against utilitarian ones. So so from a math point of view, like it doesn't work. Like from a math point of view, if you can convert deontological obligations into some unit that can be like directly compared or added to utils, well, now you've made deontology utilitarian. So there has to be some reason, because you're trying to tell me that even though you could do that, you're not allowed to for some reason, and that's what I'm trying to figure out why.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to write this up. So we have killing someone painlessly, and we say that that in our system of threshold deontology, we say that there's no utility component, right? So there's not going to be any units, any T units in virtue of its utility, and we're going to say it does have T units in virtue of its deontic value, right? So I think that the error is assuming there's a conversion happening. I think that that's the problem. I think we're just saying that a unit of utility is worth this much T, whatever like T is, right? We're just giving it a weighting in T.
Wait, that's called converting.
Well, we have to spend time on it though and get through it.
Well, sure. So if you have something that can be expressed in some units.
I know what a conversion is.
Okay, well, because you just described a conversion, you said it's not a conversion.
Right.
Well, that is a conversion, right?
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. I'm okay. So here, fine. You really want to hash that out? Is it a conversion? Let me just think about it. So
sure.
I'm just sensitive to your time. I know you said you want to go, so I'm wanting to focus on the main thing of if I just want to see if there's a contradiction. So we say that we have some action, killing someone painlessly, and we say that has a T value of -1. There's no effect from utility, and there's no effect from deontology. So now I want you to walk me through how I convert that into utility.
Sure. So so there's a killing someone. Wait, what? What is the killing someone is 0, and then you want me to convert? Can I just make up a thing and then convert that, or?
Well, it seems like what we get is we say that the T value of the action is -1, and then if we try to go, I don't even understand what it would mean to go over to utility. To convert to utility, you just
that's the whole reason why people say that. Well, wait.
You just look at how much, if there's any, like there's no utility component, right? You're just taking. It's like you can take a deontic action and you can say that has this weighting of T, right? And you can take a utilitarian action and say that has this weighting of T.
But you can't though, because for those two T's to measure the same thing, you necessarily are saying that, like, this is why I'm saying like the math doesn't support you. If you say that D equals T and you're saying U equals T, then that means that D equals U. If D can be expressed in some amount of units of T and U can be expressed in some amount of units as T, then D can be expressed in some amount of units as U. Utilitarianism equals deontology. That's what I'm saying. Just going by math doesn't work.
But no. But the problem is that you can have an action that has no utility as like standardly understood, right? And then that action still has some weighting in T, right? So if we, I don't understand how you're saying that somehow means that the action has some weighting in like standard utility. Like, why would it be the case that murdering someone painlessly has any weighting in terms of standard utility? I just don't understand how you're getting there.
I guess I don't know. I feel like most utilitarians would say that murdering someone painlessly is probably not a good thing because
No. If we remove, we're talking act utilitarianism, and we remove any consequences that affect hedonic states or that affect preferences. So there's at that point a utilitarian would say there's just no utility to the action. It's not negative, it's not positive. There's just no utility. So what I want you to explain is why that action, why there's some problem with me saying that painless killing that has a weighting of -1 in T, but it doesn't have any utilitarian weighting. Why am I committed? Yeah, so I think this is what you have to do. Why am I? Can I ask this?
Yeah, go.
Because I think I'm kind of zeroing in on the problem now.
Okay.
So what I would want you to do is I'd want you to show me why I'm committed to that action that doesn't have any utility having a utilitarian value.
Well, I mean, it would have a value. The value would just be 0, but it's not null. It's not undefined. It would have some value, right?
Wait, but 1 second. You said that somehow I need to end up with some number over there, other than I have in.
Well, yeah, the number would be 0.
In T.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so when I have this action, it has a weighting other than 0 in units of t, right? And it has a weighting of 0 in utility. So why am I committed in virtue of saying that that action has a negative t value to saying that it has some kind of like why do I have to say in virtue of that it has some kind of like utilitarian weighting other than just 0?
I'm trying to follow. Okay, hold on. Let me think for a second.
Well, I'm a bit lost also, so we'll just go until we figure it out. But I just don't understand why I can't take that action, painlessly killing someone, and say, okay, there's no effect on utility. There is a deontic wrong. So in system T, that's going to have a negative value. I don't see where I get committed to saying that there's like a utilitarian value other than 0 there.
I'll think about it and I'll get back to you. Okay.
Okay, but just to be clear, so there, you're not aware. So you claimed that there is a contradiction. Can I get you to say that you don't have a proof of?
I mean, like a formal proof, no, but I'd still stand by if you're making two variables commensurate to one other variable, it means the two variables are necessarily comparable. That seems to be like a simple math proposition that is for sure true. But there must be some other thing that I'm missing, some third modification that makes that not possible.
Well, wait. I think we can, like, I'm not trying to be hard here. Like, I think we can agree that those those two values, D and U, they both have a value in T, right? But I don't understand like what the problem is. Like, is there, if there's, I mean, I don't want to put you on the hook if you have to think through it. If you think through it and find the contradiction, then fine. But like, you currently can't show that there is any contradiction, though.
That is correct. I cannot right now demonstrate that there is a contradiction between D and U and T.
But like, and I almost like, I mean, again, you tell me when you're fucking burnt out here, but it's I don't even understand like what the problem would be. Like, we can just say like, look, this action has a negative weighting in T. It's got no utility. It's got some deontic problem. Like, I just don't even understand what the problem is. Like, what's
well, I guess like if we were to try to think of like something that had some value in utility, like the idea that painlessly killing someone is 0 util, that's like a hard sell for me.
Wait, you're fighting a part that is like I thought, okay, when you gave that initial critique that maybe I'm saying some weird shit about fucking deontic actions having a utilitarian, I was like, wait, maybe there is something fucked up here. So like, that's the interesting part. Talking about what the thing you're saying right now, like, I mean, not to be fucking like, that is not a good criticism. No, like, a philosophy people wouldn't agree with that. Like, of course you can have an action that just has no impact on utility. It's easy to just say that there is such an action.
I'm sure we could think of some, but I'm trying to think of some action that would have no impact on utility.
But why is it relevant?
That would have a meaningful obligation attached to it.
But why is it relevant to think of the specific action? We can just say there exists an action that has no impact on utility and that's deontologically wrong.
Because I don't know if that classification of action exists.
Well, sure. There's let's say we have a system where murder is wrong, and let's say that there's an instance of murder that has no impact on hedonic, utility or preference utility.
I don't know if there's something that I'm not understanding, if like hedonic utility is like a way out of that only accounts for like living people or something. But like most utilitarians, I feel, would say that like having somebody being killed is going to result in like a net negative to utility. But it seems like we've got some weird form of utilitarianism that escapes that killing people results in negative utility.
Let me give you like a useful tool. Like, you're saying, like, utilitarians would say that it's like impossible for that to, have no utility. So what I can do to you whenever someone says impossible is you can just say, show me the contradiction, right? Because if you want to claim it's logically impossible, it has to entail a contradiction, and you can't show that. So it's logically possible. So I can use it.
Wait, right? So I can't show that killing somebody can't entail any negative utility?
Yeah, no, you can't show that the an instance of murder that carries no preference utility and no hedonic utility is impossible, unless you can't say it's impossible unless you want to show that it entails.
Well, you would be going against the preference of the person being killed.
Wait, no, but say that you're not going against their preference.
Like they just wanted to commit suicide, or?
I mean, I don't know, but you have to, if you want to say, like, because what you're trying to do is a tactic that's, well, it's not, I don't mean tactic in a bad way, but you're trying to get me to spell out the details of the situation, and I can just resist that by
So,
saying, like, look,
I'm not
here
trying to
is the
get
situation.
you. Yeah, no, I'm not trying to get you on a
unless you
specific.
can derive a contradiction, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get you on the specific thing. What I'm trying to say is I can't conceive of an action that incurs zero positive or negative utils that there would be some deontological obligation to. Like, usually duties to people or deontological obligations usually seem like things that translate somewhat to some sort of like predictable utilitarian outcome. So for instance, you ought not lie, or you shouldn't murder, or you shouldn't steal. Like, most of these things we would consider deontological obligations, or deontological obligations, but I could also imagine them in a utilitarian sense. But when we start saying, like, well, what if you have a deontological obligation not to kill people who want to be killed? That's an unfathomable. There are like contradictions just in that.
Just wait a second. So let's just take like just a really, really easy example. Okay, so
Sure.
let's say that we just have a system of deontology, and I hope you won't just ridicule the system, because the idea is like the concept here should be coherent.
Okay.
And let's just say in this system of deontology, flicking someone is just considered to have negative deontic weighting. Okay.
Sure, I can agree with that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure you can think of an instance of, and again, I shouldn't have to give the example. You should just be able to say, okay, I can't show a contradiction from, the notion itself. I can't.
What I'm rejecting is this class of action exists. That's what I'm rejecting.
Okay.
So
I'll establish the class. But the thing is, what if I'm just saying, if I wanted to be a dick to you, and this is why I was giving you a useful tool, because you can do this anytime someone says something's impossible. I could just sit there and go, oh, derive me a contradiction, Steve, show me the contradiction, and you wouldn't be able to. And then I get to say,
well, what I would say is
possible. Yeah.
What I would say is, can you demonstrate to me a single action that carries some deontological obligation that has no impact on utility whatsoever?
That's not a prerequisite for it being possible, right? If it's logically impossible, you'd have to show that it entails a contradiction. Unless you can show that, then we're talking about something that's logically possible.
Okay, then I would say that utilitarians account for, or utilitarian in general tries to account for everything that deontological obligations would. Therefore, that you would have to demonstrate some action that has zero accountability in utilitarian thinking, that has some massive obligation in deontological thinking.
No. If I say, look, I'm just saying there exists an action that has no preference utility, no hedonic utility, and carries negative deontic weight. If you want to say that's impossible, just to be clear, I'm trying to generate you an example with flicking, and I have an example for you, just because I'm trying to be friendly. But I'm just giving you a useful tool, because if you get in a debate,
you keep saying you try to be friendly like it's a slam dunk, but I think it says a lot about your argument.
No. Whoa, why are you perceiving it like that? Whoa,
because
that's not what I'm thinking.
Sure, you can't conceive of a single action that would be a deontological obligation that would incur no negative utility other than killing somebody who doesn't, or who wants to be killed or whatever.
Okay. You're okay. So first of all, if we want to, so just what I was saying is, I'm going to give you an example, right? Because I'm
just
not
get an example. Yeah, go for it.
Well, Destiny, I'm giving you a useful tip. It's a thing you can use. And look, maybe you don't care, but it's just useful. Okay. So anytime, it's a very good thing. I'm glad that I learned this, right? I learned it from someone. It's valuable. You'd get value from it. So all I'm saying is that when you have someone telling you something is impossible, you don't need to go to generating examples of it, right? You can just say, oh, well, if you're going to say it's impossible, then just derive the contradiction for me, right? And if they can't do that, you can just kind of sit there and dunk and just go like, okay, well, then it's possible, so let's talk about it. But I'm not looking to do that. I'm just giving you a tip. Someone says something is impossible, you can say, derive me the contradiction. If they can't, then it's logically possible. We can talk about it.
Okay, let's hear the example.
Okay, so let's just say that we have a system of deontology, and we just say, like I was saying before, flicking someone is just considered to carry negative deontic weighting. Let's say there's an instance of flicking someone that doesn't violate any preferences. It's not going to violate any future preferences, no current preferences, and it has no impact on utility. Like maybe they are numb or something, they don't feel it, doesn't have any negative consequences in the future.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So the example of action would be like flicking somebody that has no, we'll say pain receptors, and you're not going to hurt their feelings or anything dumb like that, right? That deontologically, this action would be bad, but in any utilitarian sense, we couldn't conceive of assigning this a negative value, right?
Yes, yeah. And for the record, I don't know of any anti-flicking deontology.
Sure, that's fine. We don't care about that. Just as an example.
I was just like, what's a really easy? Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah, so you would want a moral system that would say that that's bad.
There was a challenge kind of on the table for you, and it's not a gotcha. You can come back about it. It's obviously you might have to think this kind of thing through. But what I would want to see basically is, if you're claiming there's a contradiction, then I want you to derive a contradiction from the proposition that there exists an action that has no hedonic utility, no preference utility, and negative deontic value.
Sure. I guess like I don't know. I would have to think of a way to formalize the argument, but it would look something like I would make the premise: all deontological obligations have some sort of utility consequence. It would be
How would
something
you
like that.
possibly establish that?
I would just that would be a premise, and I would ask you to reject it. And why?
Well, no, that you don't get to just assert something and then ask me to reject it. You have to establish it. Why is that the case?
I established it by saying it.
Yeah, but I don't accept that. So I mean,
Well, then why are you?
wait.
If I'm not allowed to say that, why are you allowed to say? Well, there must exist some action that has no utils but has some deontological value. There must exist some action like that. Why can you assert that? And then it's on me to show the contradiction.
I'm just saying it's not logically impossible. What is it that are you just saying something isn't logically impossible, or are you saying that it's the case that it exists?
Well, you're saying it's not logically impossible because of how you defined your terms of like utilitarian utils and deontological obligations. But if I say that any deontological obligation necessarily has some positive or negative util associated with it, because our obligations are to other people, and any actions involving other people are almost necessarily going to have negative or positive utils associated with it.
Yeah, here's the distinction. Okay, so I get what you're saying. So yeah, the distinction is I'm not saying that that's impossible, right? But if you're saying it's the case, you have to establish it. What you said was that what I was saying was impossible, which is where I'm allowed to go, oh, okay, well, derive me a contradiction. I'm not telling you it's impossible. I'm just asking if you're going to say that it is the case that there's such an action, right? If you're going to tell me that, if you're going to say it's the case that every utilitarian or every deontic action has like utilitarian weight to it or something like that, then you just need to like establish that, right?
Okay,
you're saying there's a difference, but you understand there's a difference between saying like it's not such a thing is not logically impossible and such a thing is the case, right? Like a perfect circle isn't logically impossible, but I don't think there's any perfect circles out there, right? So there's a difference between saying something is actually existent in the world versus saying it's logically possible or logically impossible. So you appreciate that, right?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So now with the threshold deontology stuff. So what I would need is I'd need you to actually, if you're going to say that there's a contradiction entailed here, because I think I fell into because I was trying to be really fair and I was like, fuck, has he actually got some trippy math thing? And maybe you do, and you can bring it up. But I was like, wait, if this commits me to saying some weird shit about utility, I want to hear it, right? But when we actually looked at it, I was just like, look, I just don't know. All I'm doing is I'm just taking this action. There's some action, we'll just say the flick, right? And I'm just saying that has a deontic weight, that has no utility weight, and I just get some value in T, right? And I just don't see how that commits me to anything weird about utilitarianism. I don't see how that commits me to any contradiction or anything like that. And it's just, I guess I would just say, if you think there's a problem like that, you would have to show it.
Sure. Okay. And I guess like to summarize my position, my problem is that for any meaningful statement where you're saying like this thing is an obligation that's wrong, but it might amount to some positive amount of utils, like to make those values commensurate to one another just seems like at the end of the day, we're just doing utilitarianism. Like if killing one person to save 5 people, that if like killing one person is worth -4, but saving a person is worth +1. So if I kill one person, I need to save at least 5 people. Like that sounds like utilitarianism to me.
So
like,
that part I do have a reply to though. So the reply that I say, sorry,
it's really late, but go for it. Hit me up.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. So the reply that I would say to that is that, you just have to remind me, just say the last few words of that, prompt my mind again.
Okay, so if I say I want to kill one person to save 4, if killing a person in D, it translated to the new unit is -4, and saving a person in utils translated to the new unit is +1, that just means that we basically are doing utilitarian math.
I remember.
Okay, yeah.
So I in a sense grant that to you, but not quite, right? So I grant you that we're all converting it into some kind of number, and then we're able to look at that number, and that looks pretty fucking utilitarian. You're going like, oh, here's units, here's numbers. You're telling how good or bad things are, but we're not. The sense in which we're not doing utilitarianism, right, is we're not just valuing actions in terms of what is typically meant by utilitarianism, which is, hedonic or preference utility. So if you want to say that it's like, if you want to say it's a new utilitarianism or something like that, like if you want to still classify it as one, then like, I mean, I don't really care. I don't mind that. If you want to say they've just created some kind of new unit, they express their units in terms of this unit, and, I still think of that as being kind of utilitarian-y. That's fine. But it's not the case that we're back to any standard system of utilitarianism, because we're not just talking about hedonic or preference utility. So do we disagree about that?
Okay, maybe. Okay, here's a question. If I could find a way to assign utils to deontological obligations, would there be any difference between that system and the one you're proposing now?
Pardon me? Can you say that again?
If I could find a way to assign utils to deontological obligations, would that be meaningfully different than your system now?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I understand what you're saying right, because I think that we can have an action that has a fixed amount of utils by any, standard conception, like
Okay.
0 with the flick, and then that has some value in t. And I just don't see why I'm committed to it having anything other than
the value that it gets in
always
t.
had in.
Yeah, the value that it gets in t comes from your converted units from d. But if
what's the problem? Sorry, I just need you to clarify what the issue is.
So my question is, let's say that I could take a set of deontological obligations and I could measure all of these in utils. And now I just did that. And now I use those measurements now in my new utilitarian system. Is there any difference between that and what you're proposing now?
Sorry, I don't know why, and it's kind of late. You're saying if you are you just talking about taking utility, taking deontology, and giving them both weighting in terms of some?
No. I have utilitarianism. I get a whole bunch of deontological obligations, a list of them, and I convert them all to utils. And then I just use that as part of my utilitarian calculus.
When you say convert them to utils, do we get actions that have a standard weighting in utility having a different weighting than that?
Well, I guess it would depend on the action. What do you mean? Or give me an example of that.
Because it just seems to me like for any action there just is some utility to it. And if you start saying that what the utility I think it has, features in this other thing, which is like some deontic concern, what you're talking about isn't utility anymore by any standard conception. So it's like you're expressing it in terms of a unit, and the fact that it's expressed in terms of some unit looks utilitarian. But I don't understand how that would just be like utilitarian.
Well, but we're comparing them to see which one is greater to find out if the action is good or bad, right?
Comparing. Well, you're taking the utility value, you're taking the deontic value in terms of units in Z, and then seeing where it lands you.
Mm-hmm. Which, and if it's plus, then it's good. If it's negative, then it's bad, or whatever our threshold is set to, or whatever. Yeah. But so you're comparing the units in a utilitarian fashion and figuring out what produces like the greater number. You're finding a way to take deontological obligations and then assign them a util value and finding out if that overcomes the other negative util aspects of it.
So, but are you trying to say that the system is just utilitarian?
Yeah, except you found a way to or what you're saying is you're giving like some util value to deontological obligations.
But that value is not the value that the action would have in terms of normal util, or else you'd just be talking about utilitarianism.
Well, but it is, because that's what you're doing. Because you're saying I'm going to give it a value. That's what you have to do, right? Where do you get those values from?
Well, no, wait. The value from the flick just comes from, where just flicks are deemed deontically wrong. It's not like the one is in virtue of its utility. It just has no utility.
Wait, no. You can't declare an action right or wrong. You have to give it a value. How do you give a thing a value?
Wait, I don't understand how that's relevant, though. Let's just say
because talking in binary rights or wrongs, that's deontological. But if you were to convert that directly to some util, it would be infinite, like in both directions.
But are you saying that the system is just standard utilitarianism?
Yeah, you're just assigning utils to deontological obligations. Yeah.
Well, wait, but that can't be the case, because you can have an action on a system like this that has no utility but is wrong. Right. So that's like the example JHC gave you. It's not the case. So I'm trying to throw you a bone, but also not end up making you think that it's just classical utilitarianism. Because if you want to say it still looks a lot like utilitarianism because we're talking about units and shit like that, I'm fine with. But if you're actually trying to say it is just utilitarianism, it's not, because you can have an action that's negative, right? It's wrong on this system that carries no utility. That's just here's a way to say it. OK, on utilitarianism, the proposition this action is not wrong is true. And on this system, that proposition is false. So it would actually create a contradiction if we said we were utilitarians and we held to this system.
Okay, I'll think about this more for the future, okay?
Okay.
I'm-
Okay. Yeah. No, I respect that you got to go. But
Okay.
okay. So it's
Keep
nice
me in
talking
mind.
to you.
I haven't demonstrated the
for-
contradiction. You got me, okay? I love you, okay? Be careful.
Dude.
Okay.
See you, buddy, my
I'll
dude.
just.
What?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. But they're just being crazy. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to clear it up. Really.
Okay. Be careful. Bye.
Okay. Peace.